Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to review The Great Balls of Fire. This is Winona Ryder's next movie in her catalog that I am reviewing, and oh boy. This one I was kind of excited about at first because it looked like a lot of fun. It looked like it might be like a nice change of pace from, the other movies in her catalog so far where basically nothing happens. I mean, you had that square dance, you had the 1969, and it's like they don't even have a story. And then you get to this, and it's a music movie. And you guys know how I feel about music movies. I don't like them. And by music movies, I mean like movies about musicians. These biopics where, the same old shit happens. You have a musician, they're very talented, they're really good at playing music, and then they play music really good. They're controversial in some way, maybe. They get famous. They sign a record deal with people in suits, with guys in suits, and then they play lots of music, and then they get married, and then they hit their wives and have affairs, and then they have kind of a sad time, but then they play music at the end, and everything is okay. And that's exactly what happens in this movie. It's the same old shit that, you see in these music biopic movies. And it's the exact reason why I don't like to watch these movies, is because they're so predictable. They're so generic. After watching Argylle last night, which was like the king of generic, this movie was somehow even more generic than Argylle. Because at least in Argylle, they did some really weird and over-the-top things that kind of felt like they could have been interesting and if done well and fun. But this movie, it was the opposite of fun. It was like a trip to the dentist office in movie form, and not for the reasons that you would think. Because, first off, I am not really the biggest fan of Jerry Lee Lewis. I've never really listened to his music much. The only time that I've really listened to it would be in the shitty Top Gun movie. And so that's another thing. It's like, I hate the original Top Gun. And so when I think of Great Balls of Fire, I think of that great pile of shit movie, Top Gun, the original. And so I was really not excited to see the life of this character, but I thought maybe it could be good. Another thing is, I never heard about this story before. The story of Jerry Lee Lewis marrying his 13-year-old cousin, getting her pregnant, and I'd never heard about that before. That's news to me. And you know what? I'm kind of glad, because here's the thing. These characters in Hollywood, these characters, these famous people, they are weird. They have weird stories, weird things that happen. They're not the pure these imaginary figures that people think they are. Like last year, there was so much outrage when, there was that picture of Jenna Ortega that got out on Twitter where she was smoking. And, then, Florence Pugh, she dated like a 40-year-old something, a 40-year-old guy, I can't remember his name, and there was a big controversy about that. Oh my God, a legal adult is with another legal adult. Oh my God, no. People really, they want celebrities to be better than them. They want celebrities to be like the perfect people, and they want them to be like, so good that, like, they're just, they're so pure and they're so perfect and, they're so amazing and, they can't do anything wrong. And it's bullshit. I mean, like, why is it such a surprise that this guy married his 13-year-old cousin? I mean, it's typical of these types of people. It comes with it comes with the lifestyle. Because people who, there's no such thing as a pure person, too. There's no such thing as a really good person who just has never done anything wrong. Like even a person who, is like look, it's that sweet little old lady down the street who she's never done anything wrong. And, she's probably done something wrong in her lifetime. Whether it's cheated on a test, cheated on her diet, cheated on her husband, cheated on something. There's no such thing as a pure person. Ever. It's a lie. It's a myth. In this movie, that's kind of like, I don't know, is that the main message of the movie? I don't know what the main message is. But, like, I think that the controversy around the story is kind of it's kind of overblown, because it's not really surprising, to be honest. Like, it's not really something where I'm like, this is outrageous, I need to go, like, speak out about this. It's just kind of like, that happens sometimes. Like, there's a lot of weird things about it, though, where it makes me question the movie, because the movie is not really trustworthy. The movie is not something that I am taking 100% as, like, the truth. Like, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about where I was like, well, what was up with that? What was up with that? Like, it wasn't like something where I was like, oh, wow, I really believe everything. This was clearly a Hollywoodized movie. It was clearly a Hollywoodized version of his life. Very, very bad in certain ways. Because another few things that I heard before even watching the movie is that neither Jerry Lee Lewis or Myra liked the movie. And that's what's funny, is that they got divorced eventually. Probably when she got, because I think too, like, I am so glad that Twitter does not have this movie, because, like, Twitter, all they do is complain about how Leonardo DiCaprio dates legal adults. And, like, if they knew about this story, they would have, like, a field day. They would create, like, some sort of a page called, like, Jerry Lee Lewis is a pedo or something. Like, Twitter would totally roast this story and this character, and, instead they're complaining about a legal adult dating other legal adults. Like, oh my god, Leonardo DiCaprio is dating somebody who's over 18. Oh no. Oh. That's all Twitter talks about, practically. They either complain about Taylor Swift and her AI porn, which nobody's jerking off to at all, by the way. I mean, it's really not that serious. I mean, there's been deep fake shit for years, and the Taylor Swift fanboys and fangirls are so retarded that they just discovered that stuff because they're so brainless and living under a rock that Taylor Swift put on top of them because she's the worst. And then I don't know, but another thing though is the fact that, as I said, neither Jerry Lee Lewis or Myra liked this movie. And that's a problem because they split up and they no longer really loved each other. And so that's pretty bad that after they split up that they still that they still, neither of them liked this movie, even though this movie it frames the story in a way where you'd think that Myra would have liked it because she wrote a book, of course, that's another cliche. after you date a rock star, you write a book. Or after you marry a rock star, you write a book about it. And you say, like, there was this one part where he hit me, and there was this other part where he was mean. And, you get that all the time. You have that all over the place. These books that are all the same. Well, neither of them like the movie. And another bad thing, another big red flag, is that the people who made the movie, they said that her book was nothing more than a jumping off point. So they weren't even, like, treating the story seriously. They were treating it like, oh, we're just going to do what we want to do, and we're going to make our Hollywoodized version of this story, and we're not really going to stay true to what was intended by the author of the book that we purchased the rights to. And, that's another big red flag. And, we see that all the time nowadays. Like last year, the Goosebumps TV show. We're just going to purchase the rights to Goosebumps, and we're not even going to stay true to Goosebumps. We're just going to, do what we want to do and make what we want to make instead of making what people want to see, the truth. So this guy, Jerry Lee Lewis, and also this is actually my first Dennis Quaid movie. I've never really seen a movie of his before where he has starred in it. I guess I've seen him in a couple of things, in Stripes and then in Jaws 3, but I can't really remember him at all. So that's another thing. I don't know if any of you guys are fans of Dennis Quaid. From this movie, I'm not really a fan. I mean, his performance is one of the things that we'll talk about, because his performance, it was really bad. I mean, all the songs, when he's singing them, you can clearly tell that he's not really singing them, to the point of where I was wondering, like, is this supposed to be like just him singing to himself, and then they're just playing the music over top of that, like, on purpose? No. Like, it was so bad that, like, when he was singing the songs himself, it actually, you could tell he wasn't really singing. They were, he was lip syncing, and it was so bad that it was really, really noticeable. I hated that. I really thought this performance was very weird. I mean, he acted like a child. He acted, the whole movie, he acted like a grown-up child. And it was so concerning, the way that he acted. It made me wonder, what happened to him as a child? Because if he really acted like this in real life, which Myra says that the movie falsely portrays both of them, and I would probably agree, because even though I haven't really seen much of them in person, in videos or anything, it really seems fake and phony and cartoonish. But the way he acts, he acts so childish that you have to wonder what happened to him as a child. Because there's no reason why anybody would act like this unless something really, really screwed up happened to them as a child. And so that was something where it was kind of like an undercurrent throughout the whole movie. Maybe it's not even, maybe he didn't act like that in real life. I really hope that he didn't. Because the way that he acted, it really raised some red flags about his life. And it made me think, like, what are they not telling us about here? Because the movie just, it runs through all the same cliches that I told you about earlier. There's hardly any points in the movie where it goes off and does its own thing. And that's kind of like another reason why this movie is not good, is because this movie is about a guy who would purposefully do things that are forbidden, say things that are forbidden, play music that's forbidden, live a lifestyle that's forbidden. That's what he liked to do, for some reason. But the movie itself, it's not on that same level as him. The movie plays it safe. The movie is very, just fluffy, marshmallow, bubblegum. There's hardly any points in the movie where you think, like, this movie is really taking a risk in doing this. It's really, taking a risk by showing us this, or, doing this part of his life. Like, wow, I've never seen this in a music biopic. No, it was just all the same old, same old. It's just the little twist was that his love interest is 13. That's just a little twist. It's almost like in Hollywood, they have like a rock biopic Mad Lib, where like, that you just fill in the blank for all the story points. And for his love interest, there was some weirdo in Hollywood, like a lot of them, and they were like,
oh, well, what if his love interest was 13?
And he just filled that in. So, like, and the rock star has a love interest who's, you could put, like, European. You could put she's got hairy armpits. You could put she's got a funny voice. Oh, no.
She's 13. That's going to be very interesting. And it's going to be a high selling point for this movie. Everyone's going to come to the theater to see this amazing true story, this very unconventional true story. Like, that's what I think. It's like, there's no way. I don't understand, like, what was in the mindset of the people making this movie that made them think, like, let's just do what we always do. Let's just tell the story that we always tell. Like, why couldn't they have done something different and, like, really tried to tell the true story? And they also said, too, that they stayed away from, like, the real people. Like, they stayed away from their influence, which is really strange, because it's like, why wouldn't you want to be influenced by the true story? Like, I just watched In Cold Blood the other day for the first time, and I thought, wow, that is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And, Truman Capote, he got really close to the true story there. I mean, he went there. He researched there. He talked to everyone in town there. He made friends with one of the killers. He was so close to the true story, it practically became his life. And that movie is very, very good. In fact, in that movie, they were so authentic that they even shot in the same house where the people were killed. Like, they were so close to real life. It was really disturbing. It was so good. Whereas in this movie, it's one of those movies, one of those examples of, let's just do what we want to do because we're Hollywood and we know better. And, we can just do whatever we want, and, everyone will love it because, we can't do anything wrong in Hollywood. So I'm going to kind of go through my notes here. In general, I was not a fan of the movie. I thought that the performances were extremely over the top. Winona Ryder, she was kind of hot in this movie a little bit, but her performance was really strange because it just makes it reminded me a lot of Natural Born Killers, this movie. It reminded me a lot of like a really shitty version of Natural Born Killers, the way that these main two characters were acting and their unconventional romance, and it reminded me so much of that I thought, I'd rather just watch Natural Born Killers because that movie is a lot better than this, and that movie was the performances were better too. This movie is just kind of creepy because it makes me think, what happened to Jerry Lee Lewis in his childhood? So they also show Elvis in the movie quite a few times. As he's another he's a part of the story in a very subtle way, where he's always on everyone's mind as like the arch nemesis of Jerry. And that's another thing where they did not stay true to reality. Of apparently in real life, Jerry and Elvis were friends. So, well, in this movie, they make it like they're like really, really have a strong rivalry with each other. and it's just kind of stupid. There's this part that I thought was funny, though, where he's playing music, and they're showing like a montage of everyone in America listening to his music on the television, like even Ward and June Cleaver, and then they show Elvis and his girlfriend, and they're in bed together, listening to his music on the TV, and then she's like really getting into his music, and he gets jealous, and I thought that was funny. That was one of the few things that I thought, oh, that's kind of cute and funny. And there's a part where, like, you got to admit too, like, he was so much like a kid that, like, he was not really able to take anything seriously. Like, his romantic relationships in this movie, it seemed like it was just kind of like something that he had to do, or something like he wants to do for the fun of it, and then he's just kind of, because there's this one part where he's getting hounded by fans, and they're all like, pulling his shirt off and giving him kisses and stuff, and it's really, really cartoony, over the top. And he just gets in the car with like a random fan. He just picks one out. He's like, let's get in the car, and they go home and sleep together. And then she cuts off like a part of his hair, and runs off and runs away, and she's like, you got what you wanted and I got what I wanted. That was also pretty funny. I wonder if that actually happened, because that's pretty scary. I've seen stuff like that before on eBay, though. It's pretty strange. And then also there's this part where, now this is where the movie takes the turn, because all up until this point, he's also, another thing that's disturbing is he's living with the father and mother of Myra. He's living with his cousin's parents, because, the father is in the band with him. And I would say that out of all the actors in this movie, the guy who played the dad, John Doe, I thought that he was probably the best actor. He gave probably the most realistic performance out of everyone. Everyone else was like a cartoon, including Winona. Especially Winona. I mean, this whole movie, they're just like constantly chewing bubble gum, and like they're like really, really cartoony. But there's this part where Jerry, he's getting really tired of like having to hide his feelings for Myra. Like, there's this part where him and her are watching television late at night, and he's like, here comes the creepy mouse, and he puts his hands up like he's gonna feel her up, and it's really, really weird. And then he starts to tackle her and starts to grope her all over. It's really funny and fucked up, and obviously they get caught, and then they get separated like children. Again, like children, overgrown children. Well, the next day, Jerry pulls up on Myra's middle school, and he does like a sing-along with all the kids out in front of the school, so that he can lure her out and take her away. And what he does is he goes in the middle of nowhere. Like, he goes to the middle of nowhere in the South, where the KKK is, and where, the creatures are running around, the ghosts of the Confederate soldiers. He goes in the middle of Nowheresville. Why? Why does he go to the middle of nowhere? Because he's got to find some church that will actually marry him and her, will actually marry a 20-something-year-old man with a 12 or 13-year-old girl. And he finds one very easily, because, it's the South. And and it's funny because you see the inside of this church, and it's everything that you would picture it to be. And they're like, Mara, will you take this man to be your husband? You know, they're those types, you know, you can tell, like, these are the guys that are really fucked up. I mean, the people at this church, they are committing sacrifice rituals. They are burning crosses out back in the backyard of this church. Like, they are fucked up, because that is the only type of person who would be marrying. I mean, nobody ever mentions that, too. Like, when people talk about this story, they never even mention the fact, like, what is up with the church, the people who married these two? Like, all they do is just complain about Jerry and his marrying her in the first place. Why don't they complain about this church, the people at this church, who, and this woman and this man, and then the priest, who willingly went along with this and married this couple? Why don't they ever talk about that? Because to me, I want to know about these people, because you can guarantee they are into some shit that you don't want to know about. They are into some things that you don't want to be a part of. And I think that is the story that people should have looked into back then, instead of looking into Jerry, because Jerry is just like an overgrown child. He's just gonna, like, oh, I'm gonna get married to my 13-year-old cousin. I just do that for fun. And, you know, like, that's what it seemed like in this movie. It didn't actually seem like he was into her romantically or anything. It didn't seem like he had any sort of, like, a real affection for her. And so, if that's really what it was like, then I would point my finger at this church. Because if they had said no to marrying them, then they wouldn't have been able to get married in the first place. Another thing is the parents, because the parents could have gotten the marriage annulled, but they didn't, because they're making money with Jerry. And there's this really, really creepy part, because the way that they portrayed this relationship was, it did not look very good. It looked very, very awkward and weird. You know, even if you, because Winona Ryder in this movie, she was 18. You know, she was not 13. So, you know, but it still was very, very weird and awkward. It was kind of hard to watch, because there wasn't any chemistry there between these two actors either. There was no chemistry. I mean, it was very, very strange. It was stomach churning. And there's this part where they're saying goodbye to their daughter, because she's going to go live with this man. And her mother says, "I'm really worried about my little girl." And you know what Jerry Lee Lewis says? He says, "Well, you don't gotta worry, honey. She's my little girl now." I mean, isn't that weird? Isn't that gross? I mean, just I mean, it just really shows that, like, he couldn't have waited. And she even said that too. Winona Ryder's character, she says, you know, can't you wait 5 years when I'm 18? Can't you wait? And he's like, no, I've got $100,000. I've got a tour where I'm going to play all over the place. And, you know, what else do you want? You know, it's like there was no other option. And so it really just begs the question of why he really wanted to marry her in the first place. Well, then we find out why. They have a sex scene in this movie. They have, and see, this is the thing that sets this movie apart from the music biopics nowadays, is that nowadays they would never be ballsy enough to show this. They have a sex scene in this movie, and, you know, it's really, really uncomfortable, because she's really, really not into it, because it hurts so badly, and and then he gets upset and he leaves, because he says that she doesn't move like a virgin. And so he storms out and leaves, because he thinks that this 13-year-old girl is not a virgin, and so therefore she's not as worth the time to him. And so, like, I guess the real reason why the screenwriters think that he married her is because
he thought, like she's a virgin, and so that's like a really prized thing. And there was no other reason, because like there's no other reason. They never show any sort of like, because normally when you have a romance, you show scenes of like the characters getting to know each other. You show scenes where they have rapport, where they have chemistry with one another. And in this film, you never see that. You just see them making googly eyes at each other, and then boom, he marries her, and he has sex with her, and he gets really upset that she doesn't move like a virgin. I mean, ugh. And then he gets a house with her. By the way, the house that he bought to live with her in. This house, this is another like uncomfortable aspect of the movie, because the house that he's with her in, it doesn't even look like a regular American house in the 50s, whatever, the 60s, whatever. It looks like a Barbie house. It looks like a doll house. And so it's just another aspect of their relationship and the story of like, they're like overgrown children. Except she's still 13 at the time. And like they had toys on the couch. Like they had stuffed animals everywhere. It was very, very creepy. There was no real romance here. It's not like with Elvis and Priscilla, where, in my opinion, there was somewhat of a romance there. I mean, especially because he waited. But with this, with Jerry and Myra, it does not feel like a romance. It feels like two children playing dollhouse together. It feels like two children that are just, they're role playing, they're playing house. At one point, the only point that we ever see her try to be a housewife is when Jerry comes home, and he's now like completely fine with her not having been a virgin, which, she probably was a virgin, and he's just a fucking douchebag, the way that he was acting to her. But she's on the floor crying, and she has trouble cooking, and so, the kitchen is a mess and everything, and, because she's 13, she doesn't have any idea how to be a fucking housewife yet. But they never show her, like, try to do that. They never show her try to, learn what to do. And I thought that was weird, because the story here is really centered on their relationship, which really wasn't a real relationship from what it seemed in this movie. And they never show her try to, like, grow up and cook a meal or anything. And I thought that would have been interesting to see, and that would have developed the story more and given more depth to this character, to see her, having to grow up so fast because she's a child bride and having to do this and that. Like, that would have been more interesting to see. And then Jerry Lee Lewis just running around town throwing temper tantrums and acting like a child. And in England, he announces to the English public that he has a child bride, and they do not take it well at all. And he plays the show, and it goes really badly, and he throws a temper tantrum. And again, it's very weird the way that he is a grown man and he's acting like this. And another example of like something that really makes you wonder what happened to him as a child is that instead, how in these movies, all the characters, they always have champagne on ice, like in a hotel room. You know what Jerry Lee Lewis has on ice? He has a milk bottle. I mean, that is just very, very telling, isn't it? Very, very weird. I mean, I like milk too. After I have cookies and milk, I drink the rest of that milk. But when I go to a hotel, I'm not going to have a milk bottle on ice instead of champagne. I mean, that's just bizarre. But his main character trait is that he likes to do things that are forbidden. And they showed that at the beginning of the movie, where him and his friend, the dad of Myra, they're playing around, and they run up to this jazz lounge, or this black lounge, and they're playing this really, really beautiful jazz music, and this the blues or something. It really, really or rock and roll, all sorts of really great songs and music, and they're both peeking inside, and one of them was taught that you shouldn't be doing that because it's the devil's music, because it's played by black people. But Jerry Lee Lewis, he was really, really interested in that music, and that's the type of music that he ended up playing. That's why he became famous, is because he was inspired by the rock music that was played by all these black musicians. And so all the way from when he was a child, he liked doing things that were forbidden. And it just really begs the question of why. And then the movie, it gets really bad all of a sudden. This is where the movie, I think, became really, really bad. Near the end of the movie, instead of telling the rest of the story at a normal pace, they speed it up. And all of a sudden, you have one of his songs playing, and there's this montage of his downfall. So they show all these Oscar bait type of scenes, you see him hitting his wife, and you see him getting out of his contract and throwing a fit, and you see this, and you see the dad of Myra quitting his band finally. You just see this really long montage instead of seeing the rest of the story in a normal fashion. And the last scene is him and his wife are in church, and Jimmy Swaggart, played by Alec Baldwin, is preaching. And earlier in the movie, he actually gave Jerry Lee Lewis this Christianity coin for him to carry around to remind himself that, wherever he's going, he's preaching the gospel. And Jerry takes that coin out and gives it back to Alec Baldwin, and he says, "If I'm going to hell, I'm going there playing the piano." It's a very abrupt ending and very lame and premature. It really is sort of like another non-ending. It's kind of like a cop-out ending, in my opinion. And then suddenly, in the ending credits, he is back to playing piano in these lively rooms, and everyone is just, all of a sudden, they like him again after he denounces Christianity. It's really weird. It doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't feel like any of this actually happened. And I just really have to wonder what did happen, because, from all the stuff that I've heard, I'm having trouble believing anything. I'm having trouble believing the ending, and believing that most of the stuff, it just feels like Hollywood was like, okay, let's make the next music biopic. Who are we going to do this time? Oh, Jerry Lee Lewis, let's do him. Then the next guy, let's do him. It's like they have a factory, and they're just, going through the daily routine of let's do this and do that, and let's not really make a piece of art here. Let's just make a piece of trash that nobody's ever going to remember in 30 years. Because I'd never heard of people talk about this movie before. I was surprised that they even had a biopic about this guy's life. It's not really even about his life either. You never really get to know him. You never really get to see him growing up very much. You never get to see, it feels so impersonal. It feels so Hollywoodized. So the food rating that I'm going to give this movie, I had to think about something that would be very childish. Something that would be very on par with the childish, cartoony nature of this movie. And I was thinking about all the meals that I had in elementary school. You know, our meals were very simplistic. We would get an entree, a side dish, and milk. Anything else would always be extra. It was weird because, like, you were required to get a fruit cup sometimes, or like a vegetable. Or no, probably never a vegetable. Actually, it was mostly just fruit cups, like these frozen juice boxes, juice cups that they would force us to get. But, like, even though it wasn't required, or I mean, even though it wasn't like a part of the main meal, they still required it sometimes. And then, like, anything else would be extra. If you wanted condiments, you had to pay 50 cents for 2 things of condiments. If you wanted a dessert, you had to pay 50 cents for that dessert. Whereas the rest of the meal, it just costed, I think, $2.75. It always cost the same thing for the most part. Except if you got, like, a special entree, which they didn't really have until, like, middle school or late elementary school. And so one of the meals that we would have would be popcorn chicken with smiley fries and then the milk. And obviously, I would always get chocolate milk. I did get regular milk one time, and I did get strawberry milk one time. And those 2 times were the only time I ever did that, ever. The rest of the time, it was always chocolate milk. And I just think, like, even though this movie is not the worst thing I've ever seen, it is not very good at all. Just like this meal isn't very good. You just get a little popcorn chicken, you get some smiley fries and milk, and it's like, that's not a real meal. There's nothing of substance there. But I will tell you guys that the popcorn chicken was very delicious. It was very good. I've never had popcorn chicken like I had in elementary school. And the smiley fries were also my favorite. I would get barbecue sauce, and I would dip the smiley fries and the popcorn chicken into the barbecue sauce. And so that's what I would give this movie. And of course, the dessert that I really liked getting all the time was always the Little Debbie fudge round. I really mostly got that as the primary dessert. And then sometimes I might get 2. I think. I can't remember if I did, though, because, like, that's another thing is, like, you were judged very harshly for what you got for lunch. Like, there was always, like, one of the things that we always saw that really, really grossed me out was we saw these people that would get pizza, and they would put ranch dressing all over the top of the pizza, and they would spread it around to where it just, it was all white, and then they ate it, and I just thought, it was so gross. Like, they couldn't just get the pizza and dip it into the ranch dressing. They had to smear it all over the top. That was so bad. But yeah, like, the popcorn chicken, that's what I would give this movie. You eat it, and you know that it's not good for you. But you think, it tastes okay, I guess, sometimes. I mean, we hardly ever had it, too. I think, like, we would only have it, like, once every couple of months or something. Because it was very basic and very, it was probably all frozen, too. So, yeah. Anyways, please like this video and comment and tell me what you thought of the movie and what you think about the true story. Is there anything about the true story that would be worth mentioning? Because that's another thing, too. For some reason, there are some people who think that I need to do extensive research before I review something that's based on a true story. And I just think that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because, like,
when they make these movies, these true story movies, they hire people to research these stories. There are people who get paid so that they can research what really happened. So if what happens in the movie isn't really what happened in real life and there's a lot of stuff that's missing, like in this case, what happened to Jerry in his childhood, that's number one for me, clearly missing from the movie, then that's not my problem. As a reviewer, that is not my problem. That is the problem of the people who made the movie, like the researchers who researched and they didn't research good enough, or they just chose to ignore stuff. Like in the Napoleon movie, where they distorted facts and made it look like Napoleon was a nitwit who didn't really know what to do, and his wife was the one who was the real star of the show. And his military success was all because of her. Stupid. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest reviews. This was certainly another disappointing Winona Ryder movie. Even though she has a sex scene, there's no way that you can enjoy it for obvious reasons. And, it's just a very awkward thing to watch. I didn't expect it. I would never have expected to watch a movie where Winona Ryder plays a child bride, but I guess there's a lot of things that happen like this, and and they even said that in the movie too, that that happened a lot back then. They were talking about in the movie, like, there were girls who were 10 or 12 who got married, and like just all these strange things that happen, because it's the South. It's the South. I mean, that should have, instead of the tagline that they had for this movie, whatever tagline that they had, they should have just had "It's the South" on top of this movie, and people couldn't understand. You know what I mean? Like, it's the South. So yeah, goodbye everybody. See you soon.